Alaska, the coldest place in America, but changing fast.
It's not difficult to put that label on it. Devastation.
We could lose a third of the landmass of the state.
We're pretty confident that nothing this severe has happened for at least the last 1,000 years.
This is a weird place to be studying global warming.
Alaska may be our coldest and most northern state, but no place in America is being hit harder by global warming. It's changing 1,000 years of tradition, wiping a village off the face of the earth, destroying forests, and possibly killing the polar bears. The 49th state may never be the same again after the Alaska meltdown.
You don't say you're going to catch a whale, you have to receive whales.
It's our lifestyle.
Whale is an animal that is very close to the Inupiaq people. It is one animal that is very big, commands a lot of respect, and feeds a lot of people.
On a fragile shelf of ice in sub-zero temperatures, Eugene Brouwer's hunting crew waits for whales. It's a dangerous job. If the ice fails, they're 4 miles from the closest land. That would be Barrow, Alaska, 340 miles north of the Arctic Circle, the northernmost city in America. Eugene Brouwer inherited this whaling crew from his father. Born in Barrow, he's the fire chief and the president of the Whaling Captains Association. And he's been whaling all his life.
I've been whaling since I was 8. It's about, what, 47 years I've been whaling.
On the quiet of the ice, it's hard to imagine that Eugene's crew is waiting to slip softly off to sea in a walrus skin boat, armed only with a harpoon, ready to do mortal combat.
Whaling is a dangerous business. You're taking boats out to chase an animal that can reach twice the size of a city bus.
Hauling the whale onto the ice and cutting it down is a community affair.
Eugene Brouwer! Harry Brouwer!
As many as 200 people will join the crew at the ice's edge.
It's the crew, it's the community that make it happen for you. It's not our whale, it's not their whale, it's everyone's.
Once the whale is prepared, the announcement goes out over the two-way radio. An entire community lines up for a celebration of sharing. But whaling is a tradition that is becoming increasingly dangerous. The new threat isn't from the massive bowhead whales in front of the crews, it's from the cracking ice behind them.
The ice density has changed, the thickness of the ice has changed, and in the spring when the ocean becomes wide open, there's no polar pack, and the ice is gone a couple hundred miles to the north of you or more.
The Weather Channel climatologist Heidi Cullen finds that in Barrow, the Inupiat don't need science to tell them that change is happening.
They're seeing things that are different from what they're used to, or that their grandfather is telling them that the snow and the sea ice is different than it used to be.
Whaling is becoming more hazardous. In the past decade or 15 years, the ice has been considerably thinner and has been less reliable. It's broken off repeatedly. And so whalers are having to watch very carefully and make hurried escapes. But one of those escapes didn't happen quickly enough, and 100 whalers broke off on the ice and floated out into the Arctic Ocean.
So big was the breakaway ice that until the rescue helicopter appeared, the whalers had no idea they were drifting into the Arctic Ocean and certain death. Others haven't been so fortunate. The ice used to be many years old and several feet thick. But nowadays, Brouwer's crew is more likely to be standing on new ice that's only 8 inches deep. not enough to take the weight of a whale.
If the ice is unstable or breaking up, they're constantly pulling their camps back or reacting to that for safety reasons. You can't hunt effectively. If the ice isn't strong enough to hold a whale that you're trying to pull up, that's a problem.
So why is the ice getting thinner in one of the coldest places on Earth?
I think if you want to understand global warming, and it's hard, it's a really tough subject to grasp because it's so big and it's about everything and it's about how everything interacts with everything else.
Global warming is having a greater impact in Alaska than almost anywhere else on Earth. Over the last 100 years, the world's average temperature has gone up by 1 to 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit. But in Alaska, the change has been much greater. The average temperature has gone up by more than 3 degrees, with winters even warmer, showing a 5-degree increase.
For the Arctic in general, a little bit of change goes a long way.
The reason why it's warming so much more up here is because this ice isn't sticking around as long as it used to.
The white is disappearing, the black is absorbing more heat.
And that is what we call the sea ice albedo feedback. This white stuff reflects a lot of light, and if we lose this white snow and ice cover, we get the darker ocean that pops out from underneath it.
The water's darker, the water accepts more sunlight, it gets warmer.
And so you get an increase in this thermal erosion.
And that's one of the reasons why scientists think that we're seeing so much more warming up here.
It changes everything right there.
It's not just the snow and ice around Alaska that are melting. So too is the Arctic sea ice that spreads across the top of the world. Since scientists began measuring it in 1976, the Arctic sea ice has shrunk 14%, a staggering 600,000 square miles. That's bad news for the polar bear, which hunts and breeds on the ice.
If the ice completely disappears in the Arctic Ocean, polar bears particularly are likely to be in very bad shape and may become extinct.
If the warming continues, some scientists think polar bears may not be around 100 years from now. Not so the whaling crews. Though the ice shelves may become too rotten to be trusted, the Inupiat will adapt as they always have.
It threatens the way whaling is done. I don't think it'll ever threaten whaling unless the whales go away.
Whatever it takes to continue that tradition, they'll do.
But whatever problems the climate is giving the Inupiat in Barrow, they pale by comparison to what's going on down the coast. Coming up, the Alaska meltdown is literally wiping a native village off the face of the earth. You have to look pretty hard to find Shishmaref on a map. It's just a thin strip of land, no more than a quarter-mile wide. This fragile island takes the first punch from any storm that comes in from the Chukchi Sea off the west coast of Alaska. And as the climate warms, the storms have become more frequent, more violent. Someday soon, they'll wipe Shishmaref off the face of the earth. Joe Brock's the school principal, been teaching here for 16 years. Drawn by the beauty and people of Shishmaref, he's seen the island slowly disappear. The next building to go could be the house where he and his teachers live.
Our house and our teacherage has sat on the beach since 1988, and I've watched it deteriorate through our playground, and it's within 9 feet now of our front steps.
We're standing here in front of the teachers' quarters.
It got so bad during the last big storm, they evacuated the teachers in the middle of the night because the stormy sea got too close for comfort.
It was real bad, man. That's the worst I've seen.
Shishmaref's been around for 1,000 years, but it may not last another 10.
There's not too many storms left.
I'm scared. Just keep our kids together and our family. Pray that we'll still have some place to live here.
Every year, the North Shore loses another 5 to 10 feet of land. One storm in 2002 swallowed 10 feet in just 2 hours. At least 17 homes have been abandoned. Water's lapping within 35 feet of the only way in and out, the runway. The Alaska natives keep a careful eye on the weather, wary of storms that seem to be getting stronger and stronger. Why is the sea now chewing huge chunks out of Shishmaref? It's because of global warming. And the Inupiat don't need modern science to tell them their climate is changing.
The Inupiat are so smart and so in touch with their environment, and the whole notion of subsistence living, it requires that intimate knowledge and that intimate connection with your surroundings.
And our ice has been freezing later and later in the year, and it's not as thick as it used to be.
In the coastal areas, we see a reduction in sea ice. We see big erosion problems in some of the villages like Shishmaref and Kivalina on the Bering Sea coast.
The sea ice that for centuries armored Shishmaref against erosion comes later these days, leaves earlier, and isn't as strong.
The last few years is very typical of what you're seeing now. Snow is gone, ice is starting to rot.
As the ice disappears, so too does the calming effect it has on ocean storms.
Imagine, if you would, a swimming pool that someone jumps in. There's lots of waves. Now take that same swimming pool and cover it with corks. And someone jumps in, and the whole wave action is muted because of all the stuff that's floating on the surface. In the time of storms, the wind blows up, but instead of having the ice to move around and dampen the wave action, those waves come crashing on the shore.
The waves used to crash against a concrete-like mixture of ice and silty soil called permafrost. But now the ice in the permafrost is melting, and sandy soil is all that's left.
Nowadays, for us to experience erosion, we don't even need a storm. We just need some high tide and a little bit of surf,
Thawing permafrost isn't just a problem for Shishmaref. 85% of Alaska is either continuous permafrost or the patchier kind called discontinuous permafrost.
The annual and then the winter.
Yeah,
As Alaska's temperature rises, the permafrost thaws.
What do we see in the future? Big changes, I think. In Alaska here, a transformation of the surface of the Earth.
When permafrost thaws on mainland Alaska, buildings sink into the ground. Roads buckle. Railroads have to be abandoned. Even supports that hold up the Trans-Alaska Pipeline could sink. Ironically, as permafrost melts, it doesn't just leave holes in the ground, it also releases massive amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Both greenhouse gases are prime suspects in global warming, the same global warming that's causing the permafrost to melt. Back on Shishmaref, they're building a new 450-foot wall of broken concrete and rocks against the waves.
I'd probably feel more secure if it was a more massive project, you know.
Over the years, at least 7 other barriers have been built out of all sorts of materials. They all have one thing in common. So far, none has been strong enough to survive the sea.
The community don't feel very safe anymore.
Tony Wayawanas lived here all his life. He used to be an artist. Now he spends his days trying to find the funding to move Shishmaref to the mainland and preserve the village's unique way of life before time runs out.
I think so. That's what a lot of our community is worried about. We want to be able to pass on our traditions to our kids to keep, you know, our lifestyle going, our tradition, you know.
As Joe Brock said, there may not be many storms left in Shishmaref's future.
I think they've been here a long time. I think they've been here forever. And I think there will be people here until there's no longer an island. But Shishmaref, as I've known it, I'm worried it'll go away.
Coming up, take a tiny insect, add a touch of warming, and watch 40 million trees die.
Huge trees just completely enclosed this area, and this was just a little cabin in the woods.
Ed and Sarah's home was in Homer, on the Kenai Peninsula in South. Ed and Sarah Berg thought they had their dream home.
Oh, it was this tiny, beautiful little log cabin nestled in the woods.
Well, this was a beautiful, mature Sitka spruce forest. Here, huge trees just completely enclosed this area, and this was just a little cabin in the woods.
Ed and Sarah's home was in Homer, on the Kenai Peninsula in south central Alaska. At the time, it was blanketed by huge forests of magnificent spruce trees.
And because there were so many trees around, I could go out on my porch and I could sing, and it would go out and then echo back at me. And I would just go out and sing for hours.
But a tiny insect was about to become a huge problem and cut the trees out of this part of Alaska for generations to come. The insect is the spruce bark beetle.
Beetles are always there. They're kind of like bacteria, you know, at a low level.
Insects are cold-blooded, and what limits insects and plants and many animals in Alaska is climate. It's just normally a rough place.
Bark beetles need at least a few days of temperatures in the 60s to safely fly from one spruce tree to the next. So all it takes to stop a bark beetle infestation is a cold spring. And Alaska used to have lots of cold springs. But then the climate changed, and Ed, a native of Homer and an ecologist with the Kenai Wildlife Refuge, was perfectly placed to observe it.
Starting in 1987, we really went into overdrive on the warm summers, and the beetle population just built up every year more and more, and there was never a cold period to knock it back. And that went through 1997, essentially, an 11-year period.
It was like a giant salad bar for beetles throughout South Central.
I can remember standing here in a beetle flight and having these things come, you know, and get in my hair and my clothes, you know, kind of like an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Sarah Berg's dream home forest was under attack by the worst spruce bark beetle outbreak in well over 300 years.
You kind of think that it isn't going to happen to you, and I thought, well, it just won't come here. We won't have this, you know, it's happening up there in Cooper Landing, but it's not going to come down here.
But it did. In fact, the entire Kenai Peninsula was virtually stripped of spruce trees. That's 40 million trees in an area twice the size of Yellowstone Park. And in place of the magnificent old-growth spruce trees, naked hills covered with grasslands.
It was very tough to deal with, frankly.
Oh, yeah, it was terrible.
I cried and I cried and I cried. It was hard.
You just felt like a part of you, been cut out. All of us living out here, I think, suffered a lot of psychic trauma.
Oh yeah, it was heartbreaking. It was really sad.
The realtors like to describe these properties with the beetle-killed trees as having emerging views,
The spruce bark beetle isn't killing many trees in the Kenai Peninsula these days.
What's causing the decline in the bark beetle populations is they just basically eaten themselves out of house and home. Not that there's been a change in climate.
And as long as the climate in Alaska keeps warming, there's a risk of other insect outbreaks.
A warmer climate definitely opens the door to other pests. Exotic ones could come in that we don't have at all now.
Meanwhile, the spruce starts the slow process of making a comeback in south central Alaska.
New trees are coming back though. I did notice that lots of new trees are coming. So it'll be back, but not in my lifetime.
Coming up, what the future has in store for Alaska. Alaska an early warning for the rest of America?
We should all care about what's happening in the Arctic, because what it really is a harbinger of things to come. Because what we know about the climate system is that everything's interconnected. So if it's changing one place, it's going to change someplace else too.
While some still debate the causes, no one questions that the climate is changing dramatically in Alaska. The sea ice is melting at an alarming rate. Entire islands are being erased from existence, and forests are vanishing. Glenn Jude is a research climatologist at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks.
Nothing this severe has happened for at least the last 1,000 years. And we're beginning to get a sense that the recent warming is now exceeding even that, which means then you'd have to go back about 6,000 years. So we're convinced it's a big deal.
Alaska's way of life is under siege right now. It may soon be the rest of America's turn to feel the heat.
What's going on up here is going to affect our economy in major ways.
You should give a damn, because in the end, this will reach you too, whether you're in Georgia or in Florida or anywhere else.
One big question remains to be answered. To what extent Alaska's meltdown becomes America's meltdown?